Welcome back, mammals. Gabe here. Today we're going back to England to talk about another devilish fiend. That fiend being Black Shuck. Now, England is rich with a lot of folklore and sightings of ghostly black dogs, so I've decided to focus on a specific one. We travel to the region of East Anglia in England. It's a region that comprises of a couple different counties: Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire, and Essex. Black Shuck is an old legend, with accounts as early as the 1100s from what I could find. The origins of Shuck's name could be connected to an Old English word, skuka, which means devil or fiend. And in a lot of the readings and research that I've done, Black Shuck is at many times referred to as a devil or a fiend, so it fits. There's also mention that potentially Shuck could just be like a slang term or a specific dialect to the area, with Shuck just meaning shaggy, which is partly how the monster is described. Speaking of description, let's get into that. Black Shuck is described as a large black dog with shaggy fur, large mouth, teeth, big eyes, red, almost fiery in some descriptions, with some people describing Black Shuck as only having a single eye on its forehead, also big and red. Other witnesses describe Shuck as also foaming at the mouth when they see him, and also potentially having chains around his neck, dangling about as he stalks people. Speaking of stalking people, Black Shuck typically is encountered by people who are alone at night, walking through footpaths or roadways, marshes, forests, and even along the cliffs and beaches of the East Anglia coastal areas. Many of these people describe Shuck following them without making a sound, and also Shuck appearing and disappearing at will. Really makes him quite the stealthy boy. Black Shuck is also described to leave behind scorch marks where he stands and the smell of sulfur, or as they like to call in old times, brimstone. Sulfur being a very gross smell and associated with a lot of demon and ghostly related things. Witnesses also describe Black Shuck's howl as freezing you in place, immobilizing you with fear. And there are many legends that say that seeing Black Shuck can cause bad luck for you. He can be an omen of death. Some legends describe that just seeing him could signify that you're going to die soon, or maybe somebody you know is going to die. And then there were a couple mentions saying that Black Shuck has been described as a guardian at times. Granted, many of the accounts and stories about Black Shuck that I've read don't really describe him as a guardian. August 4th, 1577, arguably the most famous Black Shuck sighting, occurred at St. Mary's Church in Bungay of Suffolk County. This account was written by a Reverend Abraham Fleming, who titled his account, "The Report of a Strange and Wonderful Spectacle." Wonderful meaning a different thing back then. As we'll soon learn, nothing what happened about the incident was wonderful. Let's set the scene first. It was a Sunday following the Julian calendar. They weren't following the Gregorian calendar at that time, or at least those people weren't in that area. It was a dark and stormy day. There was rain, there was lightning, there was thunder, there was high winds. And while the congregation was doing their Sunday Mass, Black Shuck had appeared inside the church, running at an incredible speed up and down the church, around the people, leaping over them, and apparently, as he passed two people who were kneeling and praying, he somehow broke their necks simultaneously. Black Shuck then attacked another man and bit him, and where he bit this man, he suffered a severe burn. Where Shuck stood, he left scorch marks, and as he disappeared from the church, the smell of sulfur was also reported. Now, while this was going on inside the church, outside the church there was a groundskeeper that was cleaning gutters, Who the hell cleans gutters during a lightning storm? I don't know. But whether he was standing on the roof or up on a ladder, the strong winds and bad weather ended up knocking him to the ground, as they would, because, again, why are you outside cleaning gutters during a storm? Anyway, he fell to the ground and was apparently unharmed, and then he had apparently spotted Black Shuck outside the church, after his carnage inside the church. Black Shuck then disappeared, and this man was left unharmed. Now, Reverend Fleming, who had written about this account, had described Black Shuck's appearance and attack as more of a sign of God showing his wrath. Black Shuck was used as a tool to kind of show the people what happens if you're a sinner, kind of keep them in line. At least that's how Reverend Fleming saw it. And I guess the two people that got killed were pretty bad sinners, and the guy that got burned wasn't that bad of a sinner, but he deserved some kind of punishment. And Reverend Fleming also believed that the storm, which seemed to have brought the dog there, was also part of God's wrath. And with everything I had read about Black Shuck up until this point, this was the first time I saw him being described as a tool by God to keep people in line. Everything up until this point has been more of a Black Shuck's a hellhound, and he's like the devil's dog, and he's dangerous, and you shouldn't mess with him. He'll bring death upon you. God apparently wasn't done, though, because about 11 and a half miles south of St. Mary's Church, we have the Holy Trinity Church in Blightboro, where during the lightning storm, Black Shuck had apparently burst through the doors and attacked the congregation, killing another 2 to 3 people before apparently causing the steeple of the church to collapse into the church, injuring others. I'm honestly surprised more people didn't die. After causing all this carnage, Black Shuck had then made his escape, apparently leaping through the church's north door and leaving claw marks and scorch marks in the door, which these claw marks and scorch marks are today referred to as the devil's fingerprints. Another Black Shuck sighting was written about by a man named Ivan Bunn, who was an author and historian. The account goes, in 1893, in Rockland, Norfolk County, 2 men were driving on a dark rural road when suddenly a large black dog had appeared in front of their vehicle. The passenger told the driver to avoid the dog, but the driver, for some reason, drove right into the dog. The dog had then burst into flames and left behind a sulfur odor, and then come a few days later, the driver died under mysterious circumstances. I think the moral of the story is, don't hit dogs with your car. Black Shuck sightings are explained away as misidentifications or potentially hallucinations from people drinking too much or maybe taking certain hallucinogen drugs, like, say, some kind of mushroom or whatever drugs the people of the olden days of England liked to take. People did have hunting dogs, some of those hunting dogs being large, and sometimes they were black. Some speculate that maybe black hunting dogs are responsible. But it doesn't really explain, I guess, how silently these animals can approach people and how they just seem to disappear and reappear. Or maybe the sulfurous smell or scorch marks that seem to get left behind. Unless those are more exaggerations by the superstitious, I'm not sure. When it comes to the 2 churches that were apparently attacked, it's a bit hard to explain those stories. With the first church, St. Mary's, you had what a whole congregation described as a black dog coming in and then literally killing 2 people and injuring another before escaping. Now, one could easily say that that story was entirely fabricated, and I could not find any evidence if Reverend Fleming was actually present in the church, or if he had just heard about the account and then wrote about it from what people told him. So I guess it's possible that the story was a fabrication, and some people like to say that maybe ball lightning was the reason why people ended up dying, or the strange phenomenon going on in the church at the time, which ball lightning doesn't tend to be large from what I read, and it tends to be extremely rare. Also, how does a bunch of people confuse ball lightning with a black demon dog? A big black demon dog. Unless ball lightning can be black and dog-shaped. When it comes to the Trinity Church, the steeple did collapse and fall through the church. From what I understand, though, the church was struck with lightning many times, and from what I know and have seen, lightning can do a lot of damage striking objects. It's a lot of energy going into something, and with churches being made out of wood, I can understand maybe the steeple getting damaged and then crashing through. But again, people described seeing a dog that apparently killed before the steeple came crashing through. Granted, again, the dog could have just been an additive, and the steeple coming through the roof after being struck by lightning could be the reason why people died. But what about the scorch marks left on the door? They're described as looking like burnt claws, and we do have images of them, so I guess that's kind of evidence. Though some would speculate that the scorch marks could have been there before the lightning church dog incident, and some say that the candle, I'm getting ahead of myself, that the scorch marks were there after this alleged account of the dog attacking the church, and that they were just incorporated into the story. An explanation for the scorch marks on the door described them as candle burns, potentially maybe done by accident or by a prankster, somebody just defacing a church door for fun. I mean, you could have burned the whole place down. I'm pretty sure majority of the building was made out of wood. And then we have the story from Ivan Bunn about two men hitting a dog that burst into flames, which it's not like they had any gas lines on rural roads those days. So I wouldn't think that something like that would have caused the fiery explosion. And again, this is one of those things where it was written about by a guy, so who knows how much of the story he may have embellished, or he just heard the story from somebody else, saw it as fact, and wrote about it. Honestly, we'll never know. Black Shuck still sees representation today through things like statues, plaques, street names, building names, and merchandise, particularly in and around Norfolk and Suffolk counties. Even in Bungay, every year they host a Black Shuck festival. You still have people to this day that claim to see Shuck or claim they know somebody who's seen Shuck. The people in that area really do respect the legend and keep the legend alive. So what do you guys think of the legend? Have you ever heard of Black Shuck? Have you ever seen him? We'd love to know down in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and like for more content. And until next time, maybe look over your shoulder anytime you find yourself walking down a dark, empty road by yourself. Because you never know. Maybe there's a demon dog stalking you. Or maybe it's the chupacabra. I don't know.